In a small, quiet town called Eldridge, life was predictable. People woke up early to tend their farms, went to work in the local shops or schools, and spent their evenings chatting with neighbors over cups of tea. Eldridge wasn't special, at least not until that fateful evening when everything changed forever. It all began on a Tuesday night, one of those calm evenings where the air felt crisp and the stars seemed brighter than usual. Ellie Carter, a shy 16-year-old girl who loved astronomy, had set up her telescope in her backyard. Her parents didn't understand her fascination with space. They thought it was just another teenage hobby. But for Ellie, staring at the stars was like peering into another world, a place far removed from the mundane routines of Eldridge. That night she hoped to catch a glimpse of Saturn's rings, something she'd been trying to see clearly for weeks. As Ellie adjusted the lens of her telescope, she noticed something odd. At first, she thought her equipment might be malfunctioning. There were thin, jagged lines cutting across the dark sky, almost like cracks in glass. She blinked, thinking maybe her eyes were playing tricks on her after hours of stargazing. But when she looked again, the cracks were still there, and they were growing wider. Ellie's heart raced as she grabbed her phone to take pictures. "Mom! Dad!" she shouted, running inside. Her parents came out reluctantly, more annoyed than curious. When they saw what Ellie was pointing at, their annoyance turned to shock. Above them, the night sky no longer looked peaceful. It was splitting apart, revealing an eerie glow behind the cracks. The light was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Neither sunlight nor moonlight, but something colder, sharper, and somehow alive. Word spread quickly through Eldridge. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, gazing upward in disbelief. Some whispered prayers while others snapped photos and videos to share online. Within minutes, social media feeds around the globe lit up with images of the phenomenon. Scientists scrambled to explain it, suggesting theories ranging from atmospheric disturbances to cosmic events. Conspiracy theorists jumped in too, claiming it was proof of government experiments gone wrong or even contact with extraterrestrial beings. By midnight, the cracks had widened significantly, and what lay beyond them became clearer. Massive shapes floated silently in the void above Earth. They weren't natural formations, they were ships. Gigantic vessels, each larger than any city skyscraper, hung suspended in the air. Their surfaces gleamed metallically under the strange blue-white light, and their designs were alien yet strangely beautiful. Rows of lights blinked rhythmically along their hulls, and protruding structures suggested weapons or engines of unimaginable power. The news channels dubbed these mysterious objects star destroyers, borrowing the term from science fiction movies. Everyone wanted answers. Who or what had sent them? Were they here to explore, conquer, or simply observe? Governments around the world held emergency meetings, deploying satellites and fighter jets to investigate. However, none of Theo. The human-made machines could get close enough to the ships. An invisible barrier surrounded them, repelling anything that approached. Back in Eldridge, panic started to settle in. People huddled together in living rooms, glued to their TVs as experts debated the implications of the Star Destroyer's arrival. Schools closed, businesses shut down, and families stockpiled food and supplies. No one knew what would happen next. Would the aliens make contact? Or would they attack without warning? Tom Harris, a middle-aged mechanic who lived near the edge of town, watched the chaos unfold with a mix of fear and curiosity. He wasn't the type to dwell on big questions. He fixed cars, paid his bills, and kept to himself. But this was different. Something about the Star Destroyers fascinated him. Maybe it was the way they loomed so quietly, as if waiting for the perfect moment to act. Whatever it was, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do something. Early. The next morning, unable to sleep, Tom decided to take a walk. He often wandered into the nearby woods to clear his head, and today felt like a good day to escape the noise of the town. As he walked deeper into the forest, he noticed something unusual. Animals, deer, rabbits, squirrels, even birds, were fleeing en masse, heading away from the direction of the largest star destroyer hovering above the horizon. It was as if they sensed danger ahead. Curiosity got the better of Tom, and he followed the trail of fleeing creatures. After about half an hour of walking, he stumbled upon a hidden valley nestled between two hills. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Scattered across the clearing were smaller spacecraft, sleek and angular, bearing markings similar to those on the star destroyers. Unlike the massive ships in the sky, these appeared damaged, some lying on their sides, others partially buried, in the dirt. Tools and debris littered the area, and makeshift shelters made from salvaged materials stood nearby. Tom froze, unsure whether to turn back or investigate further. His instincts told him to leave, but his mind urged him to stay. Whoever or whatever had left these ships hadn't done so willingly. Signs of activity were everywhere: half-finished repairs, piles of discarded parts, and strange symbols, carved into tree trunks. It was clear that whoever had been here had tried to settle temporarily before abandoning the site. Heart pounding, Tom snapped a few photos with his phone and hurried back to town. By the time he reached home, his hands were trembling. He debated keeping what he'd found to himself, fearing ridicule or worse. But eventually, he decided to report it to the authorities. Within hours, military vehicles rolled into Eldridge, and soldiers cordoned off the area, declaring it a restricted zone. News of Tom's discovery spread like wildfire. Speculation ran rampant. Had the aliens abandoned their mission? Were they stranded? Or had they encountered something worse than humans? In the days that followed, researchers arrived to study the site, collecting samples and analyzing data. Meanwhile, the townsfolk grew increasingly uneasy. Strange noises echoed from the forest at night, and some claimed to have seen shadowy figures moving among the trees. Ellie, still reeling from the initial sighting of the star destroyers, couldn't stop thinking about the abandoned ships. Something about them intrigued her, not just their design but the symbols carved into the trees. She remembered seeing similar patterns in history books, ancient carvings linked to myths of celestial visitors. Could the aliens have visited Earth before? If so, why had they come back now? Determined to find answers, Ellie began spending every spare moment researching. She pored over old texts, studied satellite images, and analyzed footage captured by drones sent into the valley. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle started coming together. The symbols matched those found in ruins across the globe, artifacts tied to legends of gods descending from the heavens. This wasn't coincidence. Whatever the aliens wanted, it was connected to humanity's past. As days passed, tension mounted in Eldridge. The presence of the star destroyers loomed over everyone, casting a shadow of uncertainty. No one knew what would happen next. Would the aliens reveal themselves? Would they leave peacefully? Or would they bring destruction? For now, the only thing certain was that life in Eldridge, and perhaps the entire world, would never be the same again. The discovery of the abandoned alien ships in the hidden valley sent ripples of fear and curiosity throughout Eldridge. For days, the town buzzed with whispers about what the aliens might want, and why they had left their damaged vessels behind. While some residents clung to hope that the visitors were peaceful, others braced for the worst, convinced that Earth was on the brink of invasion. Ellie Carter couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. The symbols carved into the trees near the alien ships haunted her thoughts. They weren't random scratches. They were deliberate markings, almost like a language. She spent hours poring over old books and online archives, comparing the patterns to ancient carvings found in ruins around the world. The similarities were undeniable. These symbols appeared in places linked to myths of celestial beings descending from the heavens thousands of years ago. One evening, as Ellie flipped through yet another dusty book borrowed from the library, she stumbled upon something startling. A passage described how certain civilizations believed these sky gods hadn't come as conquerors, but as refugees fleeing destruction. Could the same be true now? Were the aliens seeking refuge rather than domination? The idea seemed far-fetched, but it made sense given the condition of their ships. If they were invaders, why would they leave behind damaged crafts and makeshift shelters? Determined to learn more, Ellie decided to investigate the forest herself. She knew the military had sealed off the area, but she figured she could sneak in under cover of darkness. Armed with a flashlight, a notebook, and her phone, she slipped out of her house late one night, careful not to wake her parents. The cool air bit at her skin as she crept toward the woods, her heart pounding with equal parts excitement and dread. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed. Even the rustling leaves seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. As Ellie ventured deeper, she noticed faint traces of activity. Footprints too large to belong to any human, broken branches arranged in peculiar patterns, and strange glowing residue smeared on tree trunks. It was as though the aliens had been trying to communicate or perhaps warn someone. She reached the edge of the hidden valley just as the moon broke through the clouds, casting an otherworldly glow over the scene. The alien ships lay silent and still, their metallic surfaces reflecting the pale light. Ellie hesitated, torn between awe and fear. What if the aliens returned while she was here? Would they see her as a threat? Or worse, would they capture her, summoning her courage? Ellie stepped closer to one of the smaller ships. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. Scorch marks marred its surface, and jagged tears revealed intricate wiring beneath. She snapped photos, noting every detail she could. Then something caught her eye, a faint pulse emanating from inside the ship. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the hull, but before she could make contact, a loud crack echoed through the valley. Whirling around, Ellie spotted movement in the shadows. At first she thought it was an animal, but then she saw it. A figure, tall and slender, moving with unnatural grace. Its silhouette shimmered faintly, as though it existed halfway between visibility and invisibility. Panic surged through her veins, and she ducked behind a nearby boulder, clutching her phone tightly. The figure paused, tilting its head as if sensing her presence. Ellie held her breath, praying it wouldn't notice her. After what felt like an eternity, it turned and disappeared into the trees. Only when she was sure it was gone did she dare to move. Heart racing, she retraced her steps back to the edge of the forest, vowing to return with reinforcements. Meanwhile, Tom Harris found himself unable to forget the eerie noises he'd heard coming from the woods at night. Ever since his initial discovery of the alien ships, he'd been plagued by restless dreams and a gnawing sense of unease. One morning, unable to ignore the feeling any longer, he grabbed a pair of binoculars and headed toward the forest once again. As he approached the valley, he noticed something new. A faint shimmer in the air like heat waves rising from asphalt. It stretched across the entrance to the clearing, forming an invisible barrier similar to the one surrounding the star destroyers in the sky. Intrigued, Tom tested it cautiously by tossing a rock toward the shimmer. The stone bounced harmlessly, off the barrier, confirming his suspicions. Whatever force protected the larger ships also guarded this site. While examining the barrier, Tom spotted something unusual embedded in the ground nearby. A small device, no bigger than a matchbox, pulsing softly with green light. He picked it up carefully, marveling at its smooth metallic surface. Unlike anything he'd ever seen, it radiated warmth, almost like it was alive. Unsure of what to do with it, he slipped it into his pocket and hurried home. That evening, Tom showed the device to Ellie, who immediately recognized its significance. "This could be proof," she said excitedly. "If we can figure out how it works, maybe we can understand why the aliens are here." Together, they brainstormed ways to study it without causing harm. Using tools borrowed from Tom's garage, they managed to open the device, revealing a complex network of circuits intertwined with what looked like organic fibers. Their makeshift experiments yielded surprising results. When activated, the device emitted low-frequency vibrations that resonated with nearby objects, including Ellie's phone. It dawned on them that the device might be some kind of communication tool, or perhaps a distress signal. If so, it raised troubling questions. Who were the aliens signaling, and why? Back in town, Rumors continued to swirl. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking near the outskirts of Eldridge, while others reported hearing strange whispers carried on the wind. Military patrols increased, and soldiers began questioning residents about suspicious activity. Despite the heightened security, many people felt uneasy, as though they were being watched. One particularly unsettling incident involved Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who lived alone on the edge of town. Late one night, she awoke to find her dog growling furiously at the window. Peering outside, she swore she saw a humanoid figure standing in her yard, its face obscured by darkness. Terrified, she called the authorities, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. All that remained were footprints leading into the woods. Such stories fueled paranoia among the townsfolk, dividing them into two camps. One group believed the aliens posed no immediate threat and advocated for peaceful interaction. The other insisted that humanity should prepare for war, arguing that trusting extraterrestrial beings was foolish. Tensions escalated, culminating in heated arguments at town meetings and scuffles in the streets. Amidst the chaos, Ellie and Tom remained focused on uncovering the truth. They recruited a few trusted friends: Mark, a tech-savvy teenager; Sarah, a biology teacher with a passion for astrobiology; and Lucas, a former soldier turned mechanic, to help them explore the forest further. Calling themselves Team Horizon, they vowed to document everything they found and share their discoveries responsibly. Their first expedition took place on a chilly Saturday night. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and recording equipment, the team ventured deep into the woods. Following the trail of glowing residue Ellie had noticed earlier, the farther they went, the thicker the atmosphere became, charged with static electricity that made their hair stand on end. Strange humming sounds filled the air, growing louder with each step. Finally, they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow ravine. Below, they spotted several shadowy figures moving silently among the trees. Unlike the lone figure Ellie had encountered earlier, these beings worked together, carrying tools and inspecting the terrain. Their movements were fluid, yet mechanical, as though guided by both instinct and precision. "Do you think they know we're here?" Mark whispered nervously, adjusting his camera lens. "I don't know," Ellie replied, her voice barely audible. "But we need to get closer." Crouching low, the team inched forward, careful not to make a sound. From their vantage point, they observed the aliens dismantling pieces of machinery and burying them in shallow pits. It was clear they were trying to erase evidence of their presence, or perhaps hide something valuable. Suddenly, one of the aliens froze, turning its head sharply toward the team's hiding spot. Time seemed to slow as the creature locked eyes with Ellie. Its gaze was piercing, intelligent, and oddly familiar, as though it recognized her. For a moment, neither side moved. Then, with a swift motion, the alien signaled to its companions and they vanished into the shadows. Breathing heavily, the team retreated to safety, shaken but exhilarated by what they'd witnessed. Back in Eldridge, they reviewed their footage, piecing together clues about the aliens' behavior. It was becoming increasingly clear that they weren't hostile, but they were definitely hiding something. As days turned into weeks, Team Horizon continued their investigations, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the aliens' purpose, but also deeper into danger. Little did they know, their actions would soon put them at the center of a conflict that spanned galaxies, pitting humanity against forces beyond their comprehension. As Team Horizon delved deeper into the mystery of the aliens, their discoveries began to paint a picture far more complex and alarming than anyone had anticipated. Each trip into the forest revealed new clues, but with every answer came more questions. The weight of what they were uncovering pressed heavily on them, yet none of them could turn away. This wasn't just about satisfying curiosity anymore. It was about survival. Ellie Carter spent countless hours analyzing the footage and data collected during their expeditions. She replayed the videos frame by frame, studying the movements and interactions of the shadowy figures they'd observed in the ravine. One detail stood out: the aliens weren't working alone. They appeared to be repairing or salvaging equipment from multiple damaged ships scattered throughout the forest. Some of these ships were smaller, like the ones in the Hidden Valley, but others were larger and partially buried beneath layers of earth and foliage. What puzzled Ellie most was the urgency in their actions. The aliens moved quickly, almost frantically, as if racing against time. They dismantled parts of their ships, buried certain components, and left behind strange devices that pulsed faintly with energy. It was clear they were trying to erase evidence. But why? Were they hiding from someone or something? Her research led her back to the symbols carved into the trees. She cross-referenced them with ancient carvings she'd studied earlier, finding patterns that suggested a narrative. These markings weren't random, they told a story. According to her interpretation, the aliens, whom she now referred to as the Veil, based on a repeating symbol resembling V, had fled their homeworld after a catastrophic event. Their journey through space had been fraught with peril, forcing them to seek refuge wherever they could find it. Earth, with its lush resources and relative isolation, seemed like an ideal sanctuary. But there was another layer to the story, one that sent chills down Ellie's spine. In several carvings, the Veil were depicted fleeing from towering monstrous creatures wreathed in flames. These beings carried weapons unlike anything Ellie had ever seen, capable of consuming entire civilizations. Her heart sank as she realized the implications. The Veil hadn't come to Earth alone. Something far worse was chasing them. Tom Harris, meanwhile, focused on the mysterious device he'd found near the barrier. With Mark's help, he managed to decode some of its functions using rudimentary tools and software downloaded from obscure online forums. The device turned out to be a multifunctional tool capable of emitting signals across vast distances. When activated, it broadcasted a low-frequency pulse that resonated with nearby objects, including other alien technology. One night, while experimenting with the device, Tom accidentally triggered something unexpected. A holographic projection sprang to life above the device, displaying a map of the solar system overlaid with glowing red markers. Most of the markers clustered around Earth, but a few extended outward toward the Kuiper Belt and beyond. At first glance, it looked like a navigation chart, but closer inspection revealed something chilling. The markers corresponded to locations where debris from alien ships had been discovered, not just in Eldridge, but in remote regions around the globe. "What does this mean?" Sarah asked, peering over Tom's shoulder. "Are they mapping their escape routes? Or planning reinforcements?" Lucas muttered grimly. His military background made him naturally suspicious, and he saw danger in every detail. Ellie shook her head. "I don't think so. Look at how sparse the markers are outside Earth. If they were planning reinforcements, wouldn't they have more ships nearby?" "Then what's the point of the map?" Mark interjected, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard as he tried to extract more data from the projection. "It's not for them," Ellie said slowly, piecing together her thoughts. "It's for whoever's hunting them." The room fell silent as the realization sank in. The Veil weren't just hiding, they were preparing for battle. And judging by the ominous carvings and the frantic activity in the forest, their hunters were closing in. Determined to learn more, Team Horizon organized another expedition, this time venturing farther into the woods than ever before. Armed with improved gear, including infrared cameras and sound recorders, they followed the trail of glowing residue deeper into the wilderness. The air grew colder and heavier, charged with static electricity that made their skin tingle. Strange noises echoed around them, metallic clangs, guttural growls, and high-pitched whines that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. After hours of trekking, they reached a massive cavern hidden behind a cascading waterfall. The entrance was nearly invisible unless approached from the right angle, blending seamlessly with the rocky terrain. Inside, the cavern glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss clinging to the walls. But it was what lay at the center of the chamber that stole their breath. A sprawling construct stood there, pulsating with dim blue light. It resembled a fusion of machine and organism, its surface covered in writhing tendrils that shifted and retracted like living tissue. Strange symbols etched into its core matched those carved into the trees, confirming its connection to the Veil. Surrounding the construct were remnants of advanced machinery fused with organic matter, creating a grotesque hybrid of technology and biology. This is unbelievable, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with awe and fear. As a biologist, she had never imagined encountering something so alien yet undeniably alive. Mark filmed everything, his hands steady despite the surreal scene unfolding before him. Do you think this is one of their ships or maybe a weapon? It's neither, Ellie said, her eyes wide as she studied the construct. It's a distress beacon. Lucas frowned. You're saying they built this thing just to call for help? No, Ellie replied. They built it to warn us. Before anyone could respond, a loud rumble shook the cavern. Dust rained down from the ceiling and the construct's glow intensified, bathing the chamber in harsh light. The team exchanged panicked glances, unsure whether to stay or flee. Then, without warning, the construct emitted a deafening screech that reverberated through the cavern, leaving their ears ringing. "We need to get out of here," Tom shouted, grabbing Ellie's arm. They sprinted toward the exit, hearts pounding as the ground trembled beneath their feet. Just as they emerged from the cavern, they spotted movement in the distance, dozens of shadowy figures converging on their location. Unlike the veil they'd observed before, these newcomers were larger, bulkier, and radiated an aura of menace. Their bodies shimmered with an oily sheen and their eyes glowed with an unnatural red light. "They're not Veil," Lucas said, his voice tight with tension. "These are the Hunters." Without hesitation, the team bolted into the forest, dodging trees and leaping over roots as they ran for their lives. Behind them, the Hunters moved with terrifying speed, their footsteps shaking the earth. Branches snapped, and guttural roars echoed through the night as the pursuit intensified. Somehow, Team Horizon managed to evade capture, reaching the edge of the woods just as dawn broke. Exhausted and shaken, they collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stared at each other, realizing how close they'd come to disaster. Back in Eldridge, the team gathered in Ellie's basement to discuss what they'd seen. There was no denying it anymore. The Veil were refugees fleeing from a race of biomechanical predators known as the Kalith. The glowing residue, the abandoned ships, the symbols, it all pointed to a desperate struggle for survival. But why had the Veil chosen Earth, and what did the Kalith want? Ellie proposed a theory. The Kalith consumed civilizations, absorbing their knowledge and resources to fuel their own expansion. The Veil had likely exhausted their options, turning to Earth as a last resort. Unfortunately, their arrival had drawn the attention of their pursuers, putting humanity squarely in the crosshairs. "So what do we do now?" Mark asked, breaking the silence. "Tell the government? Warn everyone?" "And say what?" Lucas countered. "That aliens are fighting aliens and we're caught in the middle? No one will believe us." "He's right," Sarah added. "Even if they did, governments would probably try to exploit the situation instead of helping." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "We can't rely on anyone else. We need to figure out how to communicate with the Veil ourselves. If we can prove we're willing to help, maybe they'll trust us enough to share their technology." Tom raised an eyebrow. "And then what? Start building our own Star Destroyers?" "If that's what it takes to protect ourselves, yes," Ellie said firmly. "Because one thing's for sure. When the Kalith arrive, they won't care who gets in their way." The team exchanged uneasy glances, knowing she was right. Humanity stood on the brink of annihilation, or salvation. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. The days following Team Horizon's harrowing escape from the cavern were a blur of activity and anxiety. Each member of the group wrestled with the weight of what they'd uncovered, knowing that their actions, or inaction, could determine the fate of humanity. They couldn't afford to wait for governments or military forces to step in. Time was running out, and the Kalith were closing in. Ellie Carter took charge, her quiet determination transforming into steely resolve. She knew they needed to establish communication with the Veil if they hoped to survive. But how? The aliens had remained elusive, avoiding direct contact, despite their obvious presence. Ellie reasoned that the symbols carved into the trees and The glowing residue left behind weren't just random. They were messages, invitations even. If they could decipher them fully, perhaps they could use them as a bridge to open dialogue. With Mark's help, she created a makeshift translation program using data collected from the alien device Tom had found. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed them to piece together fragments of meaning from the symbols. One recurring motif stood out, a circular pattern with radiating lines which seemed to represent unity or cooperation. Another symbol resembled Earth itself, suggesting the planet held significance to the Veil beyond mere refuge. Armed with this knowledge, Ellie devised a bold plan. Using spray paint and glow sticks, she and her team would replicate the symbols near the hidden valley where the abandoned ships lay. Their hope was that the Veil would recognize the effort as an attempt at communication and respond accordingly. It was a risky move. It might draw unwanted attention from both the Veil and the Kalith, but they had no other choice. Under the cover of darkness, Team Horizon ventured into the forest once again. The air felt heavier than usual, charged with an almost electric tension. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sent shivers down their spines, reminding them of the hunters lurking somewhere in the shadows. As they worked, recreating the intricate patterns on the ground, Lucas kept watch, his rifle slung across his shoulder. He didn't believe bullets would stop the Kalith, but he refused to go unarmed. When they finished, Ellie stepped back to examine their handiwork. The glowing symbols stretched across the clearing, pulsing faintly in the moonlight. To anyone else, it might have looked like graffiti, but to her, it was a lifeline, a desperate plea for connection. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping the Veil would understand. Hours passed without incident. Just as doubt began creeping in, a soft hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Overhead, one of the smaller alien ships descended silently, its sleek form shimmering in the dim light. The team froze, unsure whether to stay or flee. Then, a bright beam of light enveloped the clearing, and a figure emerged from the ship. It was unlike anything they'd imagined. Tall and slender, the Veil stood upright, its body covered in smooth, iridescent scales that shifted colors depending on the angle of light. Its eyes glowed softly, exuding intelligence and curiosity rather than hostility. Around its neck hung a pendant resembling the circular symbol Ellie had identified as representing unity. For a long moment, the creature simply observed them, tilting its head as if studying their features. Finally, it raised a three-fingered hand and pointed toward the glowing symbols on the ground. A series of clicks and whistles emanated from its throat, accompanied by subtle movements of its limbs. Though incomprehensible, the gestures carried unmistakable intent. Gratitude. Ellie stepped forward cautiously, holding up her hands to show she meant no harm. We want to help, she said slowly, though she doubted the Veil understood human speech. Instead, she pointed to the symbols and then to herself, mimicking the motions the creature had made earlier. To everyone's astonishment, the Veil responded. A holographic projection appeared above its palm, displaying images of Earth alongside, depictions of the Kalith. The message was clear. The Veil sought sanctuary, but their pursuers posed an existential threat not only to them but also to humanity. The Kalith consumed everything in their path, leaving desolation in their wake. Through trial and error, Team Horizon managed to convey their willingness to cooperate. In return, the Veil shared critical information about their technology and the nature of the Kalith. Using the alien device, they accessed blueprints for hybrid weapons and defensive systems capable of withstanding the biomechanical predator's attacks. The designs were complex, requiring materials and expertise far beyond what the team possessed, but they represented hope. Word of their encounter spread quickly, thanks to Sarah's insistence on documenting everything. She uploaded videos and photos to secure servers, ensuring the evidence reached trusted scientists and engineers around the world. Governments initially dismissed the claims as hoaxes, but mounting pressure from citizens and undeniable proof provided by the team forced officials to take action. Military leaders convened an emergency summit, inviting representatives from every major nation to discuss the impending threat. For the first time in history, humanity put aside its differences, united by the looming specter of annihilation. Factories repurposed production lines to manufacture components based on the Veil's designs, while researchers worked tirelessly to reverse engineer their advanced technology. Civilians contributed however they could, donating resources, volunteering skills, and preparing shelters for potential evacuations. Meanwhile, the Veil themselves became active participants in the Alliance. Small contingents of their warriors trained alongside human soldiers, teaching them tactics suited for combating the Caliph. Despite their physical frailty compared to humans, the Veil compensated with speed, agility, and unparalleled strategic thinking. Together they developed plans for coordinated assaults, leveraging Earth's terrain to maximize their chances of survival. As preparations intensified, so did sightings of the Caliph. Satellite imagery captured glimpses of their fleet advancing through the outer reaches of the solar system, their massive ships blotting out stars as they approached Earth. Panic gripped populations worldwide, prompting mass migrations and widespread chaos. Yet amidst the fear, there was also courage. Ordinary people rose to the occasion, inspired by stories of Team Horizon's bravery and the Veil's resilience. Back in Eldridge, life had transformed dramatically. Once a sleepy town, it now served as a hub for anti-Caliph operations, housing research facilities, training grounds, and supply depots. Residents adapted quickly, taking pride in their role within the global effort. Even skeptics who had doubted the existence of aliens found themselves pitching in, driven by a shared sense of purpose. Tom Harris spent most of his days repairing and modifying vehicles equipped with alien-inspired technology. His garage became a bustling workshop, filled with engineers and mechanics collaborating on innovative solutions. Mark focused on improving communication devices, enabling real-time coordination between human and Veil forces. Sarah continued her biological studies, analyzing samples of organic material salvaged from damaged Caliph drones to identify vulnerabilities. Lucas, ever the soldier, spearheaded combat drills, pushing recruits to their limits. He instilled discipline and determination, reminding them that failure wasn't an option. And Ellie, the girl who had started it all, emerged as a leader. Her insights into Veil culture and technology proved invaluable, earning her respect from allies and adversaries alike. Despite the progress, tensions ran high. Supplies dwindled, tempers flared, and sleepless nights became the norm. Everyone knew the battle ahead would be brutal, testing the limits of endurance and ingenuity. Yet amid the uncertainty, bonds formed between humans and Veil, forged in fire and mutual respect. Stories circulated of friendships blossoming between soldiers and alien warriors, of shared meals and laughter during rare moments of respite. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie stood atop a hill overlooking Eldridge. Below her, lights twinkled in the distance, illuminating makeshift fortifications and bustling camps. Above her, the Star Destroyers loomed silently, casting long shadows over the landscape. She thought about how much had changed since that fateful night when the sky split open. Humanity had faced countless challenges throughout history, but none quite like this. A gentle touch on her shoulder startled her. Turning, she saw a Veil standing beside her, its glowing eyes reflecting the fading light. Without words, it extended its hand, palm facing upward. Resting there was a small crystal, pulsating softly with energy. Ellie recognized it immediately. It was a fragment of the distress beacon they'd discovered in the cavern. "You're giving this to me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The Veil nodded, clicking softly. Ellie hesitated before accepting the gift, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. She understood its significance. Trust. This tiny shard represented the Veil's faith in humanity, their belief that together, they could overcome even the darkest odds. As she clutched the crystal tightly, Ellie made a silent vow. No matter what happened next, she would fight, not just for Earth, but for the fragile thread of hope binding two species together. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and sacrifice, but she refused to let fear dictate their future. Tomorrow, the Caliph would arrive. Tomorrow, the battle would begin. But tonight, under the fractured sky, humanity stood. The day the Caliph arrived, the world held its breath. It wasn't a gradual approach or a subtle warning. It was an explosion of chaos that tore through Earth's atmosphere like a storm, ripping apart a calm sea. Their fleet materialized suddenly, blotting out the sun as massive ships descended with terrifying precision. Each vessel pulsed with dark energy, their jagged forms resembling monstrous predators ready to devour everything in sight. The skies ignited with fire as smaller attack craft swarmed ahead, releasing waves of biomechanical drones that screeched and buzzed like insects from hell. Eldridge, once a quiet town nestled between rolling hills, became ground zero for the invasion. The star destroyers above had been silent observers until now, but they came alive with blinding flashes of light and deafening booms as humanity and the Veil mounted their defense. Fighter jets streaked across the heavens, armed with hybrid weapons reverse-engineered from Veil technology. Soldiers, both human and alien, stood shoulder to shoulder on fortified ridges, firing volleys of plasma bolts and electromagnetic pulses at the advancing swarm. Explosions lit up the horizon, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Ellie Carter watched the battle unfold from a command post set up near the edge of town. Her hands trembled as she gripped the crystal shard given to her by the Veil. Around, her monitors displayed real-time feeds from satellites and drones, showing the full scale of the conflict. Cities burned, oceans churned, and forests were reduced to ash as the Caliph unleashed their fury. Yet amidst the destruction, there was hope, a fragile ember fueled by unity and determination. "Ellie," Tom Harris shouted over the din, rushing into the tent with soot-streaked cheeks and bloodshot eyes. "We've got a problem. One of the main generators powering the EMP grid is down. If we don't fix it soon, the barrier protecting Eldridge will collapse." Ellie nodded grimly. She had anticipated this moment, the moment when sacrifices would need to be made. Grabbing a toolkit, she followed Tom outside, shielding her face from the smoke and embers raining down. Together, they sprinted toward the generator station located near the forest's edge, dodging falling debris and bursts of enemy fire. Along the way, they passed wounded soldiers being carried away by medics, their cries echoing hauntingly in the night. At the generator site, a team of engineers worked frantically to repair the damaged equipment. Sparks flew as they rewired circuits and replaced blown fuses, but progress was slow. The Caliph's relentless assault showed no signs of letting up. Just as Ellie knelt beside the main control panel, a deafening roar shook the ground. A massive, biomechanical creature emerged from the trees, its body covered in armor-like plates and glowing red veins. It moved with unnatural speed, slashing through anything in its path. Lucas appeared out of nowhere, wielding a modified rifle loaded with alien ammunition. "Get back!" he yelled, opening fire on the beast. His shots struck true, piercing its metallic hide and causing it to stagger. But it recovered quickly, charging forward with murderous intent. Ellie and Tom scrambled behind a pile of rubble as Lucas continued his desperate fight, buying them precious seconds to finish the repairs. Finally, with a triumphant shout, one of the engineers flipped a switch and the generator roared back to life. The protective barrier around Eldridge shimmered back into existence, deflecting incoming attacks and giving the defenders a brief reprieve. Exhausted but relieved, Ellie turned to thank Lucas, but froze when she saw him lying motionless on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Tears welled in her eyes as she rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap. "You did good, kid," Lucas whispered weakly, forcing a smile despite the pain. "Don't stop fighting, not until they're gone." Ellie clenched her fists, anger mixing with grief. She wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but there was no time for mourning. The battle raged on, and every second counted. With newfound resolve, she stood up, wiping her tears away. Picking up Lucas's rifle, she joined the others on the front lines, determined to honor his sacrifice. As the hours dragged on, the tide of the battle shifted unpredictably. The combined forces of humanity and the Veil inflicted heavy losses on the Caliph. But the biomechanical invaders adapted rapidly, countering each strategy with brutal efficiency. Entire platoons were wiped out in minutes, and key positions fell under relentless bombardment. Despite their technological advancements, the defenders struggled to keep pace with the Caliph's overwhelming numbers and ferocity. In the midst of the carnage, Ellie remembered something crucial: the distress beacon in the cavern. Its core contained enough energy to disable the Caliph fleet if overloaded properly. Realizing this might be their only chance, she rallied a small strike team consisting of Mark, Sarah, and several Veil warriors. Their mission was clear yet insanely dangerous: infiltrate the largest Star Destroyer hovering above Earth and activate the EMP device embedded within its energy core. "No way," Mark protested when Ellie outlined the plan. "That ship is crawling with Caliph. We'll never make it inside." "We don't have a choice," Ellie replied firmly. "If we don't try, we lose everything. Everyone who fought today deserves better than surrender." Reluctantly, the team agreed. They gathered what supplies they could: explosives, communication devices, and prototype cloaking suits, and prepared for the perilous journey. Under cover of darkness, they slipped past enemy lines using underground tunnels dug by the Veil to avoid detection. When they reached the cavern housing the beacon, Ellie activated the crystal shard, which emitted a low hum that resonated with the construct. The device responded, generating a portal that transported them directly onto the Star Destroyer. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, filled with the faint hum of machinery. The corridors twisted and branched like a labyrinth patrolled by Caliph, drones that scanned for intruders. Moving cautiously, the team avoided confrontations whenever possible, relying on stealth and quick reflexes to stay alive. At one point, they narrowly escaped discovery when a patrol rounded a corner just moments after they ducked into a maintenance duct. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the heart of the ship: the energy core chamber. Massive conduits snaked along the walls, pulsating with raw power. In the center of the room stood the core itself, a towering cylinder encased in shimmering metal, radiating heat and light. Ellie approached it carefully, studying the alien interface etched into its surface. Using the knowledge gained from weeks of research, she began inputting commands, overriding the system to redirect energy flow toward the EMP device. But as she worked, alarms blared throughout the chamber, alerting the Caliph to their presence. Within seconds, the door burst open, and a swarm of biomechanical creatures flooded in. Mark and Sarah opened fire, providing cover while the Veil warriors engaged the enemies in close combat. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off armored hides, and the clash of blades echoed through the chamber. "Hurry, Ellie!" Sarah shouted, reloading her weapon. With trembling hands, Ellie completed the final sequence. A countdown timer appeared on the interface, ticking down from 10 seconds. She turned to the others, shouting, "Go, I'll hold them off." "No!" Mark yelled, grabbing her arm. "We're not leaving you behind." "There's no time to argue," Ellie snapped, shoving him toward the exit. "Trust me, I'll be right behind you." Tears streaming down their faces, the team reluctantly obeyed, retreating into the tunnel leading back to the cavern. As the countdown reached 0, Ellie pressed the activation button, diving behind a console as the core erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rippled outward, disabling the entire Caliph fleet and plunging the battlefield below into eerie silence. When the dust settled, the surviving defenders emerged from their shelters, staring in awe at the disabled alien ships, floating lifelessly in the sky. Cheers erupted spontaneously, spreading like wildfire as people realized they had won. The Caliph retreat signal confirmed their victory. They weren't coming back anytime soon. Back in Eldridge, Team Horizon reunited in the ruins of the town square. Bruised, battered, and grieving, they embraced one another, grateful to be alive. Ellie stepped forward, holding up the crystal shard. Its glow had dimmed slightly, but it still pulsed with warmth, a reminder of the bond forged between two species united in adversity. Though the cost had been immense, the alliance between humans and Veil promised a brighter future. Together, they vowed to rebuild, not just their homes but their trust in one another. And high above, the fractured sky began to mend. symbolizing the resilience of life and the enduring power of hope.